Netflix and Pablo Escobar had a really good history together. Pablo's actions gave Netflix the popularity as a streaming platform with the hit show Narcos, and in return, Netflix made Pablo's story immortal, as it will always be there as a TV show for people to watch. Do you think you would be able to understand the mind behind Escobar? Just like the saying, the devil might actually be in the details that are hiding. So this video tries to reveal other aspects of the story that you didn't know. So, if you love the idea, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. If you did, let's start with number 1 is Wagner Moura's pro-drug statement. Wagner played the role of Pablo Escobar in Narcos to perfection. The Brazilian actor was applauded for the role and is so synonymous with Escobar that his images come up in a Google search with the name of the drug lord. But they've even more in common. Moura believes that drugs like cocaine should be legalized, and after the experience of life of Escobar, he takes that even more seriously because in a world where cocaine was legal, Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, mostly recognized as a shrewd businessman who became wealthy from nothing and gave most of his fortune back to the poor. Murders began with the closing of officials who wanted to have him imprisoned, locked up, or extradited. Number 2, Escobar's suicide. If you know something about the history of Pablo Escobar, suicide must be a very strange word to be associated with his death. But paying attention, and we'll see where Pablo Escobar kills himself. It is claimed that it was made by close family members like his brothers, and especially his son Juan Pablo. Juan Pablo was the last person to speak with the boss before he died, and he gives a very convincing argument for why he believes that his father's death was a suicide. Let's consider his arguments first. Juan Pablo says his father killed himself, always telling him that the telephone was a dead end, because Juan Pablo knew that the center of the Secret Service Spike and the police officers were watching and monitoring the airwaves to determine the locations of cartel members. The police officers monitored the ether to determine the locations of the cartel members. Pablo Escobar always spent very little time on the phone and always ordered his son not to use it. The second point is that Escobar's family had just been turned away from Germany and then was forced to stay in a Colombian hotel owned by the armed forces, which suggests that the Escobar's family was never in a safe enough position wherever they went, and that the hotel's phone lines were tapped with certainty. Pablo must have known these facts. The third point is the fact that Pablo taught his son how to commit suicide in the event that they were captured. While Pablo says his father had told him that the best way to avoid torture and to die quickly would be to shoot in the right ear instead of in the mouth. Pablo's brothers confirm that Pablo had said that he'd rather kill himself than to be killed by the pursuers, since it wasn't a pleasant death. Let's now relive the last moments of Pablo with these facts in mind. Colonel Martinez and his son Lieutenant Martinez used the direction-finding equipment to try and locate any phone signal, while Pablo Escobar simultaneously talks to his own son Juan Pablo about an interview that Juan Pablo already knows on the phone. According to Juan Pablo, his father called him 7 times while he was trying to get to him. He tells that in the call each time complains to his father that this is dangerous because their phone probably was tapped and he already knew about the topic that was discussed. Juan Pablo understands that his father is trying to save her from being questioned by the police and betrays himself on the phone. Lieutenant Martinez holds an antenna of the vehicle and suddenly the coke gang looks back after the police have collected enough evidence. Forces had gathered and they storm the house, and only then Pablo puts down the call and says something strange is happening here. I will call you back. The shooting follows. His bodyguard Limon is killed and Pablo is shot several times on the roof before his body goes limp. During inspection, a gunshot wound is found on Pablo's head. Guess where that is? The right ear. Personally, we find it strange that he was found and killed exactly 1 day after his birthday, almost as if someone wanted to have a last supper. A real laugh. Number 3, the influence of Carlos Lehder. Carlos Lehder was the son of Klaus Wilhelm Lehder, a German who had left his country to Colombia and changed his name to Guillermo Lehder, and married a Colombian woman named Helena Rivas Carlos. Later, they went to America with his mother after his parents' divorce and eventually landed in prison. Carlos met a fellow inmate named George Jung. They both planned how to revolutionize the cocaine trade and with the transportation of drugs to the U.S. by small airplanes. They started the business even before he met Pablo Escobar and even played a major role in Escobar's emergence as a wealthy man. as he later became a billionaire and even offered himself to pay Colombia's foreign debt twice. Which was his plan to escape from extradition, unlike in the show, in which Lato was just an imbecile who was told to keep his mouth shut in meetings and regularly outed himself on national radio, and the description of his story and his fall from grace was far from comprehensive. Number 4. Secrets of La Catedral. In the show, Escobar's 5-star prison is a luxurious prison with a lot of personal belongings of the drug lord, but it does not reveal everything. Remember the recordings that we talked about earlier. There was more Escobar content hidden in La Catedral in the show. Escobar leaves a big book with pictures in it, but Agent Murphy and Peña's book Manhunter, they explain in his adjacent office. We found a film in the wastebasket when we went to get the film developed. We found pictures of Escobar, which we converted into mugshots. Peña adds that he has all wanted posters that had ever been issued against him in Colombia, and almost every article that had appeared about him, kept in his files, even threatening letters from his enemies. Escobar was very tidy, and this also showed in the bathrooms of La Catedral, which Peña called strangely sparkling with 3-inch walls. Perhaps the most shocking discoveries were the letters from mothers who had sent their daughters to Pablo for sex. The lace negligées and several vibrators and sex toys neatly arranged in a cabinet was an interesting detail of her book. Number 5. Pablo's relationship with his family. Since the man's family is not consulted, although they were an integral part of the show, it is only natural that their interactions with Pablo were important to tell a story, especially when you already have preconceived ideas. Maybe no other relationship was more misinterpreted than that of Pablo Escobar's relationship with his son Juan Pablo, now known as Sebastian Marroquin. Sebastian is now out of the drug business, and he often talks about his experiences as the son of the biggest drug trafficker in several interviews. In these interviews, he explains how he remembered that his father loved him very much, and at the same time the image he had with the effects of his violent activities, once saying, "Well, I have learned so much about violence that I have become a man of peace, you know?" Sebastian says that his father taught him all about drugs, and said that marijuana was Pablo's drug of choice. He should console him if he should ever decide to try a drug. Maybe this training helped, or it was the memory of a relative who has suffered from the consequences of drug abuse, but Sebastian never felt that pressure to use drugs. Number 6. M19's true nature. This is the aspect of narcos that most experts will not agree with. M19. It was one of the largest guerrilla groups in Colombia. Their ideologies included left-wing nationalism, Bolivarism, revolutionary socialism, and from Marxist-inspired co-theory revolutionary Che Guevara. In the exhibition, M19 is described as a bunch of naive idealists who have not the slightest idea about guerrilla warfare, and who were led by an ex-college professor who also knew nothing about guerrilla warfare, which was a dramatic distortion of the facts that M19 had one of the most feared presences in Colombia. Leonardo Aparicio Garcia tells how his aunt had escaped the attack on the Palace of Justice, and he summarizes the story with the words, "It was not only my family in California that was close to death. They were really powerful, and they also knew how to make fear." Number 7. Pablo Escobar's atrocities. When you watch the show, you already have a kind of the idea that Pablo Escobar was one of the most fearsome men to ever walk the earth. Agent Steve Murphy explains what law enforcement was like before Escobar, who was not familiar with narco-terrorism. Narco-terrorism involves the use of violence to influence the government, to influence policy against drug laws. According to Murphy, Pablo Escobar was the first drug terrorist, and to be fair, his terrorist activities are well documented. What is also shown in the show is that Escobar found it quite easy to order the killing of others, but his personal dealings with people seem to be a little benign, and never lead to anything fatally good, except for the undeniable cases like the murder of Moncada and Galeano. Apart from the fact that in his personal sphere, Pablo is mostly seen as a restless man with a romantic relationship with his wife and children. In reality, Don Pablo was a drug lord through and through who knew firsthand how to get reports from informants. Pablo would drill into his enemy's kneecaps if he were to be angry. Another case that is known to us is the fact that Escobar killed every single architect who made one of his hundreds of houses. Architects, all Italians, were killed because Escobar did not want anyone to know the secrets of each estate. With the murder of childhood friends Moncada and Galeano, was said that Escobar sent the fingers of the men to their family members. All this makes you think about the true extent of his cruelty, which is not portrayed in Narcos. Number 8. He and his family. Pablo's brother was angry about the show, and if you watch the show, you've now probably wondered where Escobar's brother was all the time. In the show, Roberto Escobar wasn't only Pablo's brother, he was also the cartel's accountant, until he was arrested when Pablo died. Believe me when I tell you that Roberto wasn't happy when the show found another accountant named Blackbeard, who was arrested and then turned against the cartel to the authorities. He's demanded compensation of $1 billion from the streaming giant for his image. Number 9. Escobar's recordings. One reason why the exhibition was so extensive was because of these photographs that Pablo Escobar firmly believed that the recordings of events, and these included video recordings of events at his haciendas. With this, they were able to make a fairly accurate construct of the kind of conversations, fashion, and activities in the daily life of Escobar and the people around him in the show. Number 10. Narcos' original plan. The story goes that Netflix had originally planned that this story be a feature-length film, rather than a television series. However, when they began to dig up evidence and research about the King of Coke, they were certain that a single film wouldn't be enough. They discovered several stories about the origins of his riches, starting with a man named Cockroach. So yes, with that last one, you actually probably know everything you should about the Narcos and the small details Netflix wouldn't tell you. Of course, you can always tell us if you know any details that were not in the video, or the details you like from the video. Also, give us a like while you are down there. And if you love videos like this, you should subscribe to our channel, Real Outlaws, for more videos like this. We're happy to have you here. We'll see you in the next video, and goodbye.